Lauren, according to Austin police, no officers were hurt yesterday. Like you mentioned, both the suspect and victim had to be taken to the hospital. The connection between the two is unknown at this time. APD says yesterday morning officers were called out to a disturbance in the 4000 block of Green Hill Place. The witness says they heard a man saying he had a gun and would use it. Interim Police Chief Brian Manley later said another caller told police the suspect appeared to be suicidal. When officers arrived, a 69-year-old victim was found with multiple stab wounds. He was taken to a hospital in critical condition. As another officer approached the 59-year-old stabbing suspect, he started walking towards the officer. He refused to put down his weapon despite multiple commands to do so. Manley said the officer, who was wearing a body camera, started walking backwards as the suspect allegedly continued to refuse to drop his weapon. That's when the officer shot him.
I think it's very unfortunate that here we are yet again, just a couple days after we were talking to you about, a tragic incident that took place down in Central Austin where someone lost their life. And again, there's no indication that anything led to either of these that is common or is connected.
The incident Manley is referring to happened early Friday morning around 6:40 off Linwood Street. Police received a call from someone telling them a man was possibly on drugs and neighbors heard screaming. While on the phone with dispatchers, a man stabbed a woman in her 30s multiple times. An officer arrived just minutes later. The body camera he was wearing shows a 23-year veteran entering the apartment complex and seeing a woman bleeding on the ground. The suspect, a black man in his 50s, could be seen walking around with a knife. He refused to listen to the officer's commands to drop that knife, so the officer shot him. The woman died at the scene, and the man suffered critical injuries. None of the names of those involved in either shootings have been released at this time. Both of those officers who fired their weapon have been placed on administrative leave until the investigation is over. Lauren, from Friday to Sunday, there were two separate officer-involved shootings. There are a couple of similarities between the two, but Austin police say there is no connection. The latest shooting happened yesterday morning just after 10:30. Interim Police Chief Brian Manley says police were called out to the 4000 block of Green Hill Place after a caller told police he heard a man say he had a gun and was going to use it. The other officer-involved shooting was early Friday morning in Central Austin. Now, going back to yesterday's shooting, police say when they arrived on scene, they received another call from someone saying the man who lived at the house sent them a suicide note. After reviewing the officer's body cam footage, Chief Manley says the officer approached a suspect who was carrying a knife. The suspect, described as a 59-year-old white man, continued to walk towards the officer with his weapon. The officer told him to drop the knife, but the suspect refused. Chief Manley says that's when the officer shot him. Another officer arrived on scene and found another man, a 69-year-old white man, who was on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Both were taken to the local hospital.
We're a major metropolitan city. We have gone many months without having one, and that's just how they are. There's no rhyme or reason or sequence to these things.
On Friday, a woman believed to be in her 30s was stabbed to death in Central Austin after the suspect also refused to listen to police commands to drop his weapon. An officer shot him. He was taken to a local hospital and had to go emergency surgery. The suspect in that case is described as a black man in his 50s. Neither of the officers involved in those two shootings were harmed, but both of them have been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, and that's common practice for APD.